What makes an identity sticky? An identity, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, has a cost. Every identity consumes energy, time, money, natural resources, and it has a yield. It produces a certain amount of suffering, a certain amount of friction, and a certain amount of well-being. And to a large extent, we cling to our identity, despite the fact that all identities exist on a continuum, meaning every identity costs a certain amount of energy and yields a certain amount of suffering, a certain amount of well-being. And everyone wants more well-being. It's biological than we're currently experiencing and wants to consume less energy. In other words, everyone wants the benefits of an identity upgrade. And yet, identity is quite sticky. It's one of the stickiest things imaginable. You will find abused children in an abuse identity clinging to their family, to the familiar, more than to almost anything else, right? So what is it? What are the forces? You could almost call them gravitational forces that bind us to identity. So one element is need. We have a need for certainty. And the need for certainty transcends the need for pleasure. The question is why? Why would someone, why would you, why would I choose miserable certainty over ecstatic uncertainty? Right? Well, the first reason is that when you move into uncertainty, the ecstasy is not certain either, right? What you're really moving is into volatility. And the second thing, in order to grow, in order to evolve, we've got to be able to test our models of interacting with reality on a stable reality, right? They've shown this with animals. It's called learned helplessness, where you take a dog or a pigeon or some animal, and you put it into an environment where if they do one thing, they get food, and if they do another thing, they get an electric shock. Now, here's the thing. If the variables change, meaning if there isn't the stability of certainty, the animal will just lay there and give up. The only way the animal is going to grow, going to iterate, is if there is stability. Right? Why? Well, every time you make an effort, every time you do anything, you are consuming energy. Now, what happens if you're in an alcoholic family and one day you come in and you show your good grades and you get praised, and the next day you come in and show your good grades and you get slapped across the face, and the next day you come in and show your good grades and you get slapped across the face, and the next day you come in and show your good grades and get slapped across the face, but the next day, and there's no pattern, you get praised, right? The mind is a pattern organizing system that is intended, that is designed to attune to a given reality, to learn a protocol, a response, that yields sustainable well-being. So that's what it's trying to do, but it can't do that when A, the variables are outside of its control, B, there's a chaotic and random change. And as a result, the thing that gives you a good reward today gives you a bad reward tomorrow, and there's no way to predict how long or how often that's going to go on. If you're making an effort, and it takes an effort to get good grades, and one day it gets you slapped and the other day it gets you praised, and you can't tell which, you will shut down. Just like that dog, just like that pigeon, in order to conserve energy. Because what your environment is telling you is that the only guaranteed thing is an erratic pain, pleasure, reward, no matter what happens. So you might as well do absolutely nothing. This is how dogs will sit on the ground receiving electric shocks and just tune out. Because there's no pattern, right? If one day they press the lever and they get food, and the next day they press the lever and it's an electric shock, they're not going to make any effort at all, right? There has to be something that is stable, something that is certain, right? You can think of a basketball player trying to shoot hoops. They're trying to learn how to get the ball in. Now, the only way that they can do that is if the hoop stays in the same place, if the glass behind the hoop has the same amount of bounce every time, if the basketball is the same size every time, and the pressure, the air in the basketball does not change with every bounce. In other words, if every time you were dribbling a basketball, you bounce it down, and the air is at 50 psi, and then you bounce it down again and it's at 30 psi, and then you bounce it again and it's at 70 psi, then the same tap produces wildly different bounce characteristics. And so you cannot predict how you need to throw it in order to get into the hoop, right? So the need for certainty is foundational, comes before the need for pleasure. Because you can't iterate towards more pleasure, you can't grow, you can't evolve until you can rely on certain stable elements. And the thing about abusive parents in the abuse identity with a small child is the abuse is chronic. It's stable. In other words, if you want to grow, if you want to iterate as a biological being, you're better off with stable horror that's reliable than you are with erratic, chaotic volatility, where sometimes things are good and sometimes things are bad, and there's no way, there's nothing you can do to improve that dynamic, right? And see, when the abused child who hasn't developed a response protocol goes out into the world, and this person's nice to them, and this person smiles to them, and this person ignores them, they're entering chaos. And what they want is certainty. They want something that's familiar. They want the family. And it doesn't matter how good or how cruel the family is. What matters is it stable, right? Do I know what the pain feels like? Can I adjust to it in any way? Is it my kind of pain, the one I grew up with? That's fundamental. The need for certainty is the need for stability. The need for stability is foundational to growth, to moving forward in any way imaginable. And so identity is a stable platform. It's a habit. It's a habit of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And if we change our identity, if we change the habit, we lose stability. We create uncertainty. And this is disorienting. And it presents us with the greatest human fear, which is the fear of the unknown, right? Because the fear of the unknown is in and of itself neutral. But if something is truly unknown, the unknown contains horrors and fears you have never imagined because they're unknown. Right? The very nature of the unknown means that your deepest pain in an undefined form is contained in that possibility field, as well as your most beautiful joy, your most exquisite ecstasy, your greatest accomplishment, the one you don't know that you don't know. That's also in the unknown. But you don't know how to navigate in the unknown because it's unknown. The fear of death is a subset of the fear of the unknown. Because if you knew with certainty what was going to happen when you died, all the fear would disappear. The fear of death is resting on a deeper fear, which is the fear of the unknown. Right? If you change your identity, your pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, you will experience a different reality. Your world changes when you change your pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Because the world is as much a creation of your identity as it is a creation of itself, right? The world is an identity, a series of patterns, right? Atomic patterns, molecular patterns, gravitational patterns. The world is an ecology of identity, of patterns. And when you change your pattern, everything else changes in response. But the thing is, you cannot be certain about how the world will change until you do. Right? If you're looking down and frowning at your phone 24 hours a day, and instead you put away the phone and you look up and you start smiling, you don't know for certain what's going to happen. Maybe you'll stop a suicide from someone who feels alone and surrounded by people who never notice. Maybe you will feel completely and utterly alone, that nobody looks up at you. And you'll decide it's pointless. Maybe you'll start asking about the principles of identity, the basis of all these people doing the same thing that doesn't seem to be very fun. Maybe you'll decide that the best use of your life is to put an end to cell phones so that people can go back to connecting with one another Or maybe you'll decide to go back and look at your phone like everyone else. You don't know what will happen until you change your identity. And within that unknown is your greatest fear of your most intense pain and your greatest joy. Right? The extremes that you lack the humility to imagine are out in the unknown. And a possibility field that is that big, that is that luminous and that dark, that constricting, that we cannot control, is overwhelming, right? And so what we all do as infants and as people entering a new environment, a new workplace, is we spend the first priority is establishing the floor, the boundaries, the rules. We watch people carefully, and we see that nobody looks the boss in the eye, and we learn that, okay, that one person looked at the eye and got fired. Okay, so the rule is nobody looks the boss in the eye. Okay, got that? Good. All right. The other rule is that everyone cheats on their timesheet, and if somebody doesn't cheat on their timesheet, everyone gets mad at them and gets worried that they're going to be ratted out, and so they topple that person's career prospects. That if you don't join the gang, you don't have a good future. So you learn, okay, I joined the gang, right? I joined the gang, I've got that, right? Then you learn that the office is largely of this political persuasion, and the people that aren't are silent. If they speak up, they get ratted out, set out for failure, etc., etc. And so you learn that it's best to be silent. Now, once you've got the rules sorted out for dealing with the new environment, it is no longer unknown. It's no longer uncertain. You now have a high probability of surviving in this particular environment if you follow the rules, right? It doesn't matter what the rules are, and this is another thing you learn, right? If mom has a phobia for spiders and will go out on a drinking binge for 3 weeks anytime anyone plays a joke about spiders, and that could risk putting the family on the street as she's the main breadwinner, right? You don't play jokes about spiders, right? After you've tasted a little bit of life on the street and maybe recovered and realized this is really, for whatever reason, who knows, that's the rule. You never talk about Uncle Harry's birthday. Why? You just don't, right? Because all hell breaks loose, meaning reality becomes uncertain and unstable in a way that the people in that reality do not know how to navigate and survive, that you don't know how to navigate and survive. So the taboos remain respected by everyone in the system. Right? If your family has been destroyed by smoking marijuana in public, literally destroyed, right? Broken home, imprisonment, shame, lose the house. Your friendly government, for your own good, has destroyed your family. It doesn't matter that marijuana has medical properties. It doesn't matter that it's not as toxic to the culture as alcohol. It doesn't matter that people have been doing that for tens of thousands of years, quite harmlessly. It doesn't matter that your government has forged the science as the basis of the ban for political reasons. All that matters is that not smoking marijuana becomes the number one law to protect the future of your family. Right? If your life is ruined because a family member had a motorcycle accident, well, then maybe that's the new law. Or if it's not integrated and responded to at a conscious level, maybe the law is that everyone is an alcoholic, that everyone does go to prison, because that's the certainty. That's what we know how to respond to in this family, because we already did it before, right? So the need for certainty, the need for the familiar, the need for family and replicating the family system is the starting point for all growth, all evolution, all iteration. You need something to be solid, right? And it doesn't matter what that something is. You need solid floors, solid walls that you can learn the art of regulation, the art of interaction with. And it doesn't matter what those floors, what those walls are made of, right? So in a world where the most certain thing for a young black man is that his father goes to prison, in a world where that is the most certain thing, you may not get into college. You may not live a long life. You may not get any money. But no matter what, most of the men in this house are going to jail. That becomes necessary when that is the most solid, the most certain element in the identity mix. Then that is held on to, then that is created, then that is repeated in order that the next two things, to avoid the fear of the unknown, which has things far worse than prison, as well as things far better than prison, to avoid the fear of the unknown, to avoid the overwhelm of uncertainty, and to begin to develop, to begin to iterate off, to bounce the ball off something solid and learn how to regulate that rapport. The design of going to prison for X number of years becomes critical to the evolution of that individual, of that family system, when that's the most certain thing, whatever is the most certain. If the most certain thing is we always go into the military in our family, if the most uncertain thing is we violently fight, we drink, we tell lies, we have affairs, right? We are a shameful, shame-based family that everyone looks down on. Whatever is most certain will be attached to without question, right? Because the identity forms before there is thought. The initial identity, the child identity, which is an act of sympathy, an unquestioned, innocent download of the dominant patterns around us, is the first stage of development. I will learn your language, even if it's a bad language, even if it's an irrelevant language. You guys are talking it around me, that's what I'm going to learn. I will eat your food. It could make everyone fat. It could give everyone nervous anxiety disorder. It doesn't matter. You're all eating it, I'll eat it too. I'll go to school and learn what you're learning. it doesn't matter that what you're all learning is largely irrelevant to today's life. I'll learn it anyway because that's what you're learning. It doesn't matter if that's no way to treat a man or a woman. That's how you're treating a man or a woman. I will learn it too. Because the innocent hypothesis is very simple. You're all alive and have been alive for some number of decades. I'm new to this thing. And whatever it is you're doing, you're still alive. And that's better than nothing. It's not a bad hypothesis if you can't think, if you don't have alternative options to draw from. You're all alive. I don't know how to stay alive. I'm dependent on you. And you've been alive for a few decades. Let's do whatever it is that kept you alive for a few decades, because that's better than nothing. That is the first identity, and it's biological. It's an instinctive attunement process that is unconscious and unquestioned. And in order to begin growing in that environment, I must first accept as a certainty that these things and these things will stay the same. It's a certainty that I'll die before I'm 40. It's a certainty that all the men in this family are drunks. It's a certainty that we'll be poor and uneducated. And it's a certainty that 3 out of every 5 men in our family will go to jail. And it's a certainty that we'll be treated unfairly in our cult. Okay, I've got the rules down. Now I can start to iterate. What do I do a little bit differently? Maybe I get mad rather than get depressed. Maybe I join a gang rather than isolate, right? So now I can learn new ways to relate to these certainties, these core assumptions. But I'm going to create and regulate my behavior in such a way that maintains the core assumptions. I'm not going to leave the street, because out here, the core assumptions don't work anymore. It confronts me with the unknown. So we all seek and need certainty, and a healthy home, a healthy family, the things that are certain take you forward. Everyone in this house will get an education, and it will be a good education. That's the bottom line. I don't care what we have to do. We may have to spend time in the library if we can't afford the books. If Dad can't afford to put you in college, well, we'll design our own homeschool program. But the bottom line is, the one thing that you can count on is every one of us is going to be educated. Okay, that's the certainty. Got it, right? We eat healthy food in this house. I don't care if it's soaking beans for 24 hours and cooking those and getting some local spices, fresh herbs out in the forest. I don't care what it is. We eat healthy food in this house. We always tell the truth in this house. It may not be a nice truth, may not be politically correct truth, but we tell the truth and we respect that. Those are the certainties. Those are the consistencies. Whatever it is that is most consistent is what a child will adopt without thinking, right? Whenever Dad's feelings are hurt, he blows up and he leaves and punishes Mom. That's the only thing that's there every single time. Happens again and again and again and again. Okay, that's what men do. I'll accept that. And now I'll try and just be a little creative, right? Because as soon as we have established certainty as the first need, which is reinforced by the fear of the unknown, now we can begin iterating. What I mean by that is, okay, it's a given that hurt is expressed as anger is for men in this house. That's a given. But I'm going to start exploring. I'm going to start getting creative. Dad expressed anger, his hurt is anger by going to the bar. I'm going to go play video games. I'm going to be innovative. I'm going to be creative, right? So I'm going to go play video games, and I'm going to explore the statistical probability field there. We've got 30% pleasure. We've got 70% pain. Okay, that was the bit. I'm going to retreat. That's what men do in this family. But I'm going to go do video games. Dad retreated to alcohol. I'm going to retreat to video games. Now, I'm going to retreat to books, right? It's not a very manly thing to do in a chauvinistic cult. It's not very macho in a gang cult. So maybe I'll drive away violently, spin out the tires, drive away. And then once I'm, well out of view, then I will escape into books and I will discover that, right? So I'm going to do the system. I'm going to apply the law, but I'm going to start iterating it. And what I'm looking for how the system is trying to evolve through me is it's looking for higher yield of well-being within the protocol and worse, and reduced suffering. So that's how I'm going to iterate. Certain things are going to be, because as soon as the need for certainty is met, the very next thing that is met, that is the need is to grow and explore variety, right? Right. So as soon as I know that I will never be loved, that's the most certain thing it seems like I can find. So that's the bottom line. I will never be loved. Now I want to explore all the different ways that I will be rejected and I want to understand the field, and I want to know what my options are. And I like this way of not being loved more than I like that way, right? My mother just looks down and never looks anyone in the eye. Anyone tries to be friend to her, she turns away because, she's following the law, obviously. No one's ever going to love her. But I want to do it differently. I want to be sarcastic, right? Anyone that tries to get close to me, go fuck yourself, right? You think you're so smart, da 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 da. I know you're going to reject me, and fuck you. Now, I feel better, right? I hate looking at my mother, right? She's just constantly, no. I feel better then. No one's going to love me either, mind you. But I prefer to feel better than to feel less than. That's my contribution to the family system. Fuck you. Or, I suppose you think you're really smart, that I would be interested in you, right? I'll humiliate them until they leave, right? I'll do something, right? And so usually in a system, the children they won't all do the same thing. For example, in my family, I was the dissociative one. My younger sister was the critic or the judge, right? So I withdrew from the family system to survive. She became the judge, the arbiter between the parents. And so both parents, children, of course, in a traumatized, dysfunctional family, both the parents are children trying to get their needs met from parents they didn't get and didn't have. And so my sister agrees to be the judge and the parent, right? So she will say, no, mom's doing it right, you're doing it wrong here, dad. Dad would say, oh, what do I have to do to get your approval, sister, right? And she would say, well, you have to do this and this. And they would both try to bring their cases to my younger sister. And so that's how she, iterated that particular set of laws, right? And then the younger one, just below her, got lots of attention and stuff by becoming a delinquent and a little bit of dissociative, some addiction, right? Then the other one did tantrums. right? So he would have tantrums until he got what he needed. And then the youngest, all the other roles were taken, so he would please everyone. So he would smile and try to make everyone happy and just try to listen and be the ideal person, right? So everyone felt worthless for who they were. No one vulnerably expressed feelings. Those were two certainties. But how they got and navigated within those laws, you have to pick a strategy that nobody else has picked, right? Because there's not room for two judges, right? Someone's going to win out as the top judge, and then the other person is redundant, right? And so to survive, to have a use in the family system, you've got to diversify. You've got to have specialty. So, the specialty dissociation and moving out of the system, the specialty to be the judge, the specialty to draw the family together with delinquency, right? Because then the family had to come together in order to solve what to do with the delinquent, or appeasement for the tantrums, or reward for making everyone cheerful, right? So you've got different roles, but you've got certain things that would never change. Thou shalt not feel with any vulnerability is, for example, absolutely certain. That's rock solid. You can count on that. The question is, what do you do about it? Do you have hurt feelings? Do you criticize everyone? Do you tell lies and say you don't have any feelings? What you do with that particular law, that changes. But the law, thou shalt not feel, thou shalt not be vulnerable, thou shalt not express vulnerable feelings. Absolutely not. That law is solid. And anyone who violates that law, because it's the whole framework of certainty that everyone's depending on to feel safe in the fear against the unknown, anyone that violates that law is going to be punished, is going to be hurt until they get back in line, and until they stop upsetting other people by eroding the foundation. And the foundation is killing people, right? Thou shalt not have vulnerable feelings, thou shalt not feel, thou shalt not express vulnerable feelings. So everyone is lonely. Everyone feels a certain amount of worthlessness because there's no basis for authentic feelings. Everyone feels isolated and competing to get attention, right? Which is never enough because it's not the right kind of attention. Right? If you need some protein and you eat a candy bar, because that's the only thing available, you still need protein. You just feel a bit sick, right? But your choice is to eat another candy bar or to go hungry. And so you eat another candy bar. You get a little bit sicker, right? And that's the dynamic, right? But you can't let it go because that exposes everyone within the system to the terror, to the fear of the unknown. So identity is sticky because the first need for growth and development is certainty. And the first step is to copy what was, to internalize the family system without question. So you have the first source of stickiness. You have the second source of stickiness, which is the fear of the unknown. And this is the fear of the boogeyman. If you don't do what you're told, you will be cast out of the family. You will be unloved. You're no longer a member of this family, right? Terror. If you don't do what you're told, God will hate you and burn you alive in a lake of fire, right? Stick with the path. This is the program. Now, you could look at these things rationally, right? So God burns people alive because they didn't do what he ordered them to do, right? But What about that person dying of cancer who's a priest? Right? What about Jesus dying on... Well, no. It's not supposed to be rational. These fears, these dreads of the unknown that are shoved towards a child, if they misbehave, meaning if they step outside of the line, whatever that is. Parents get very upset when their children don't copy them. When an extroverted comic gives birth to a sensitive philosopher, they get upset, and why aren't you laughing? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you having some beer, right? If you go out with a group of friends drinking, they get angry if you don't drink, right? Because it's fine if you get in a car accident and you lose your job and you say dumb and crazy shit and you go to jail. That's fine. You have creativity in the way you express your drinking. But you're going to drink or you're out of this group. And if you're cast out of your group, the child dies, right? So the child fear, the fear of death, of not survival, is very visceral and real in the body. The infant knows that if they don't learn language, if they don't start doing this, if they don't copy dad, copy mom, fit into the cult, they could be killed at any moment. And the infant sees the rage, sees the violation, sees the trauma, sees the intense emotions in the system, and doesn't want that intensity of energy directed on them. They comply, they conform, they adopt, and the tension melts away. It feels good, right? Even if it's absurd, the tension melts away. You're now one of the guys, have another drink. Right? We can be creative in how we express the consequences of following the rules. But there is a tremendous magnetism that keeps the same thing going on for no other reason than that it makes other people and ourselves comfortable. That we know how to deal with the things and the problems that come from doing what we've always done because we've had generations of time solving those problems, right? In Lord of the Rings, I think it's in the Two Towers, Theoden and the Rohirrim, right, are going to go to Helm's Deep because Helm's Deep has always protected the Rohirrim, the tribe. That's the place of safety. It was the place for my father, for my father's father. They're going to go to Helm's Deep, right? But they didn't take into account gunpowder, right? Helm's Deep is this magnificent fortress, for those who haven't seen Lord of the Rings. It's this magnificent stone fortress, right? No one can get from behind. No one can possibly climb up all those stone walls with archers, shooting down, right? But the betrayer, right? And the enemy, they're not planning on doing it. Now they're trapped in a wedge with no place to escape. And gunpowder destroys the stonework. And the defense crumbles. And they've got nowhere to go, right? So there's this pivot point where at every point in the history of humanity, there are these big changes in technology. There are these big changes in life where the thing that kept you and your family alive, we put our nose down to the ground, we don't make a fight, and we work hard. There comes a time when that destroys the family. Or we do whatever the gang leader says, and we sacrifice 2 or 3 of our children, let them be arrested, but the gang leader rewards the rest of the family. That's what we do. That keeps us alive. We send 2 or 3 of our children off to the military to be killed in whatever conquests or defenses are present, and we are honored people for killing our children, right? But the family grows on. That's what we do. And then it stops working. It always, eventually, 1,000 years, 100 years, 500 years, million years, 10 million years, if you keep staying the same, you die, right? From the entire inception of the universe to the present day, things have been changing, getting smarter, more intelligent. Every single day, the universe is getting bigger, more complex. And that means more experiments. That means more identities are out there. More patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being are out there every single day. And as they meet in competition, as they meet in relationship with one another, right? Any identity, any pattern that stays the same, that will not respond to a changing environment dies, is consumed by other patterns of energy that do and will respond. And yet the only way we can respond, we can change, is to face the fear of the unknown, which is our greatest fear. Right? So we have the pain of death, of ceasing to exist, and we have the fear and the pain of the unknown. And if we don't change, we die. As a species, as a family, as an individual. And if we do change, we face the unknown. Right? It's a difficult place to be, particularly for severely traumatized children. Severely traumatized children have experienced an overwhelming complexity of energy out in the world, and they've tried to retreat to something safe. Every time they wake up in the morning, right, to experience the unknown of the day, it's brought new pain, new suffering, new terror. So they don't want to, their number one fear is of the unknown. Just don't talk to me, don't touch me, I want to stay in bed forever. It's incredibly terrifying. And yet that guarantees eventual extinction, eventual death, a lack of growth. It becomes the only certainty. If you don't change, you die. If you do change, you face the unknown in which you may die or you may succeed. But if you have failed, if you have been hurt many times before, it may be safer to cling to the certainty of failure and pain rather than that this time it might be different, right? If you step into the unknown enough times, you will succeed some of those times. 3%, 5%, 10%. Depending on those statistics, you have to step into the unknown, 97 times to be guaranteed at least one of them will work. If it's 10%, you have to step into the unknown 10 times to be assured that one of them will work. You step into the unknown, sometimes it goes your way, sometimes it doesn't. Depending on the statistical probability field, that determines how many it's one or the other. And yet some of us whose certainty, whose identity is bound up in I am a failure, need to fail every single time to protect themselves from the unknown of what's it like to win, what's it like to be free.